So, ma'am, you were born in Himachal Pradesh. So, when you thought about becoming a filmmaker, and when you told your parents that I want to become a filmmaker, like they have supported you, what was their reaction?
Yes, so since you're from Jalandhar, which is quite close to Punjab, is pretty close to Himachal, I'm sure you will understand what a far-fetched thing it is. I mean, all of us over there, we watch films and we enjoy watching films, but it ends there. Nobody really thinks of it as a possible career option. And what happened in my case was that, when I was younger, I when I was in school, high school, etc., I was a very good writer, and I kind of thought that my calling was in journalism. So I studied mass media with a specialization in journalism, and I was very certain in my college years that this is something that I want to do. But as I further studied it and I did some internships as well, I realized that this is not really what I want to do. And because I had come to Mumbai, to St. Xavier's College, to pursue my mass media, over here film is perceived in a different manner, because it's, of course, it's watched and entertained and as entertainment, and it's loved, but it's also a very viable, thriving industry and a career option for people. So the perspective on cinema changed, and actually, what really uh, I think a milestone in my life was when I joined this film club in St. Xavier's College, which would show great classics of cinema, as well as slightly more contemporary world cinema from great authors over the world. And that really opened my eyes to what the possibility of at the expanse of cinema. Because before that, I was mostly, exposed to classics of Hollywood and Bollywood and contemporary things that, people of our generation grew up watching. But over here, suddenly I was exposed to a whole different type of cinema, which touched me and really impressed me. And that's when I thought that, these are the kind of films I want to make. And my parents' first reaction when I told them that, I'm planning on, stopping journalism and I want to pursue film, was, I mean, they were supportive, but they were a little, because even for them, it's something very unknown. So they were a little hesitant, but I have to say that they've been very supportive. And as the years have progressed and they saw me working really hard in different roles, and they saw the kind of films I was being a part of, and attended some shoots, attended some screenings, and read some reviews, etc., etc. As the years have gone by, it's become they've understood the process of filmmaking and what the whole career involves, and they've respected it even more. And I think I am where I am today really because of my parents' support.
Okay, great, great, ma'am. So, ma'am, have you gone to like film school, and what is your opinion on film school? Like, should someone go? Uh, they can learn on their own.
It's really, I think it really depends on the type of person you are. Like, for me, see, as I told you, I studied mass media, which had all different disciplines, journalism, advertising, public relation, and film. And then later on, I did post my bachelor's, I did a post graduation in film and television because I felt like I needed it. And I am personally the kind of person who likes to study. Okay, I love studying, and quite a geek that way. So for me, that amount of it felt right. And many times, I mean, there was a time when I was considering going abroad to study, to do an MFA, and in somewhere in one of the American universities, or even looking at some European options. But it is considerably expensive, so that's probably the first thing that stopped me. And then I also got advice that it is also something that you can learn while you're on the job, and that's why I started working. But I would say there's not really a generalized answer for this. It really depends on who you are and how you like to learn. Some people like to learn practically, and some people like to learn in a classroom. So yeah, that is my take on it.
So, ma'am, how you met ma'am Panganin sir? Your collaboration, when like you have done Angry Indian Goddesses and the last film show.
Yeah.
So, ma'am, how you met her?
So, when I was very, very young, when I was still in school, in fact, younger, much younger than you also. I had watched this one of my this uncle of mine had given me the DVD. That time DVDs hote the. DVD of the film Samsara. And I watched it and I was quite blown away by it because I'd never seen a film like that before. And I watched it a few times and I was very impressed by it. And it was something that stayed with me. And at that time, I mean, I didn't really know who Pan Nalan was. I wasn't very, I didn't know much about him. But many years later, when I was in fact, just as I finished my college, and I thought maybe I should, I was in that dilemma where maybe I should go abroad to study further, or maybe I should work in here in Mumbai. At that point is when, through a friend of a friend, I heard that there's this filmmaker who's recently moved from Paris to Mumbai and he's setting up his office here and his name is Pan Nalan and he's looking for an office assistant. So I was like, what? It's Pan Nalan? So I was like, I have to apply for this job and I went for the interview and there was a lady called Deepika Gandhi who was his associate producer at that time who interviewed me and gave me the job and I started working there and it was several years. I worked my way up from being a office assistant to a production assistant, production coordinator, then helping him with a bit of research and being a director's assistant, eventually being a second AD, uh, helping in a writing and development in a lot of projects, and then as a first AD on set, and eventually as a co-writer in the film Angry Indian Goddesses. That was the first film that I co-wrote along with Nalin, and for me it was a huge learning. Being with a filmmaker who's as kind of you know gifted with the kind of vision that he has, it's really been an amazing learning experience. Apart from I mean, before Angry Indian Goddesses there was a documentary called Faith Connections that I was also a part of, and post Angry Indian Goddesses there were a couple of other projects, and then there was Last Film Show, which was his latest film, which I was first AD on. And I think every project that I've worked on with him, whether it's a writing assignment or whether it's a film, has been like an immense learning and really enjoyable experience as well, which has made me all the more fall in love with the process of filmmaking. But I won't say that it's been very easy. It's also been a very to make films, the kind of films that he makes and the kind of films that I want to make is it's not easy. There are very few opportunities for funding. There's a lot of rejection. There's a lot of strife, but there's something in it, I think, that just drives all of us to carry on, and that's why we're here, I guess. Yes.
And my Angry Indian Goddess created a genre of its own, like Veere the Wedding and all those.
Yeah.
Like when you see, like when you compare all those films, like how happy and how proud you are.
We feel, I think both me and Nalin and another co-writer with us, Dilip Shankar, and an additional writer, Arsala Qureshi, all of us feel really proud and we are aware that we were actually the first in India to pioneer this girl bonding chick flick kind of a thing. And I mean, if since I'm sure you've seen the film, it also deals with a lot of serious issues. Uh, so it manages to do both and I mean, yes, we do feel very proud of it, and we did it. The manner in which we made it was very ad hoc and very improvised. But we had great actresses and we had a great team, so it came together really well. And many years later, I think it was because Angry Indian Goddesses came out it premiered at TIFF, and then it had its India and various worldwide releases in 2015. And I think the rest of the, I won't really take names, but some of the names that you took of various other Indian films which follow the same format came a good 2 3 years later and are continuing to come now and are doing pretty well and are pretty popular. So personally, I feel like the depth that ours had has not been touched as yet, but maybe I'm just partial towards it because it was my first work. So yeah.
No, it's totally a superior film.
Thank
And ma'am, if it will be released today, like the title will be the same or it will be changed.
We'll have to involve Nalin in this conversation because from the beginning, it was like the title was so controversial because it's such a great title, Angry Indian Goddesses. It's so strong and it makes you want, like, it evokes so much curiosity and it's kind of like a punch in the face. So it's a great title. But especially for the release in India, we were advised by many, industry veterans to have a Hindi title. And as much as we tried all kinds of really strange, funny, even good titles, but just nothing really fit as well as Angry Indian Goddesses did. So then eventually we did stick to it. In today's climate, I'm not really sure if such a title would be accepted. But I mean, yeah, I think we should involve the director more in this conversation.
So when while doing the last film show, like you knew like it will be the shortlisted for India to Oscars, like
No, absolutely not. I mean, last film show was, again, it was, last film show is actually Nalin's autobiographical kind of a story. It's inspired by his own life, right? He grew up in that particular area of Gujarat, and his father sold tea at a railway station. And the railway station was, converted from meter gauge to broad gauge. And, so actually, what you see in the film, the life of Samay is pretty much like what Nalin's life was at that time. And so, it was Nalin wanted to make this like very much independently. He didn't want any big producers attached because he wanted complete creative independence as far as the project is concerned, because it's really his story and his personal story as well as his love letter to cinema, to celluloid. You know so when we made it, it was like, again, quite a small team, and non-actors, as far as the child cast is concerned, in even the other adult actors were mainly from Gujarati theatre, etc. And he was also very certain that he wanted to make it in Gujarati language, not convert it to Hindi. So, there were all these things that made it a very, very indie film, a very independent film, and it was made with a lot of sacrifice and a lot of strife. Um, and we always had the faith that it's going to be a great film and it's going to go to a good festival, because Nalin has that track record of always premiering at an A-list festival. And then, of course, while we were in post and the film was almost ready, the pandemic had happened, so that put things back. But in spite of that, I think we were very lucky to have a premiere in Tribeca in 2021, where it also won the audience award. And actually, so the shortlist for when the shortlist for the Oscars, when it was announced as India's entry for the Oscars, we were all very surprised and happily surprised, of course, but we really didn't expect it. Uh, and that year, and I think there are lots of political things and a lot of you know many things at play as far as Oscar um, entries from countries go. So we were really not expecting it at all, and I think it's still a miracle that um, we were sent as India's entry. But the great part is that that year itself, Nalin was made a member of the Academy, and he has a base in LA, as well as, so he knows a lot of people there, and also because it is such an exceptional film, we did go pretty further into the Oscar campaign. It was shortlisted, so it made it to, from I think whatever the 88 countries that send their films, then
top
eventually,
15.
yeah, top 15. So it made it to the top 15, which is a very, very tough process. You have to campaign, for which you require a lot of a lot of specialized PR and a lot of resources, a lot of funds, which were very hard for the project to bring together, but somehow they did get it together. And post shortlist, of course, it was a bit of a heartbreak when we didn't make it to the nominations. But that there's a whole different thing at play there, as far as voting amongst the members of the Academy is concerned. So I think countries who have more faithful voters manage to send their films further in as far as this category is concerned. Yeah.
Now, ma'am, let's talk about your film, Second
Right.
Chance. It was premiered at Cardiff Film Festival
Yeah.
at Proxima Competition.
Yes.
So, ma'am, how the idea came for the story, ma'am, first of all?
The idea is very inspired by my own life in a way because see, I was born and brought up in Himachal Pradesh, which, as you know, is a very small state, and it's a place. So my childhood was spent in a place which is very quiet and scenically beautiful, and life moves at a very slow pace, and its life is very simple. But when I moved to the city, I had to, take on another persona as such. A city like Mumbai, which is extremely fast paced and like an urban jungle. So I feel like me as a person, I'm a product of two very different worlds. So one is, the Himalayas where I was born and brought up, which are rustic and timeless, and one is this fast-paced, ever-changing life of modern India. And Second Chance is a story about the meeting of these two very different worlds. So it comes very personally to me, and it's very natural for me, and that's why it was the first film that I wanted to make. So it's a story about the meeting of these two different worlds. So my main protagonist is a young urban woman like myself, and the other two the other people in the film are from a Himalayan village. It's set in the Kulu Valley, and so that is where the world and the characters come from. And the ultimate goal was that I did feel I wanted to tell a story about two things. One is a story about healing, um, and one is a story about unlikely friendships, because I feel like we live in a world which is very very frantic and fast paced, and it has a bit of a tunnel vision, if you ask me. And young people like yourself, and even older than you, people as old as me, I guess, they suffer from a bit of a kind of a tunnel vision, and at times of personal tragedy are not very lack that perspective to understand that they're going to come out of it, you know so I've experienced this myself, but more I've also seen it firsthand in a lot of my peers and slightly, like, people around me. So I wanted to tell a story that shows the process of healing from a personal tragedy, and no better place to set it than in the Himalayas, where this healing can happen so naturally and so beautifully. And I wanted to tell a story about unlikely friendships because my characters come from totally different generations and from totally different classes, but they find so much in common with one another, and they're able to help one another and empathize with each other, that they form really really beautiful bonds that kind of surpass all the man-made barriers of class and age and modern, traditional city, uh, village, whatever you may want to call it. So, yeah.
Great. So, ma'am, first of all, the question is why black and white, ma'am?
Hmm. So this is quite a common question, as you can imagine. So it's like from the beginning, it was always a black and white film for me. And when I think back as to why this is the case and I try to introspect on it, I think primarily, it's the journey of my protagonist, whose name is Nia. It's the journey of finding light at the end of a very long and dark tunnel. She begins in a very depressed, dark place where she's almost suicidal. And, like I said, she's undergone a personal tragedy, and she probably feels like it's something she's never going to recover from. But in the end, she does. She does overcome it and overcomes it and many other things in her life, and learns so much and kind of comes of age. So it's that, therefore, light at the end of a dark tunnel, which I felt would be very well expressed in black and white. And also, kind of the philosophy of the film is deals with like paradoxes of kind of light and darkness. How actually life is kind of like an interplay between the two, and one really cannot exist without the other. So you have to accept both to be able to move on with life. And I felt this would be best played out in the yin yang of the natural world as we see it. So this is the very internal, intrinsic reason for the decision. And now cinematically, I also felt like, you know not that many, not that very many films are made in Himachal, but even when you see documentaries and when you see photography done over there, it's always in like bright colors because it's so beautiful. And I felt like but black and white is something that's not been seen. It's also, this particular valley, all the valleys look different from one another, but Kullu Valley in the winter season with its kind of very bright blue skies which look gray, and white snow peaks and those bare branches of the apple trees, it makes for like a very beautiful stark cinematic visual in black and white. So I felt it would be an interesting thing to try out. And somewhere, it kind of also, if you start looking at the local characters in color, it's just so distracting because they're so colorful. They're tribals after all, right? So that's the way they dress with their caps and their pattus and stuff. And then they just become more like caricatures or more like examples of a particular culture. But I really wanted to show them as human beings with different with their own personal stories and their internal journeys. So I think these are a few of the reasons why I felt black and white for the film.
Ma'am, as you said, like it was the actors were professional and non-professionals. So did you face any difficulties while
Yes, yes.
doing?
Actually, Akash, all the people you see in this film are non-professional actors. So my lead actress Dheera, who plays Nia, is now studying to be an actor. But this is before this she was not an actor. So, including her, everyone you see, it's all non-actors. And I was very certain that I want to go with this approach, because being having grown up in this place and being very very attuned to the way people are over there, just the physicality of the way a old woman in this valley looks, because she spent all so many years in this harsh Himalayan sun working in the soil, and she has those lines on her face, her hands are a certain way, as well as the intonation with which she speaks local language, as well as Hindi is laced with a certain accent. It's a very distinctive Pahadi accent. I really didn't feel confident that I would be able to get actors who will play this convincingly. Like the first person who would have to, like maybe for a foreign audience, it would be okay, but for any somewhat sensitive Indian audience, they would guess that, these are actors playing a role. They're not really the people. And authenticity for me as a filmmaker is very, very important. It's one of the top things that I go for. So I wanted it to be very authentic. Uh, and that's where the decision for non-actors. And then also because I had known Dheera and I felt she would really, the kind of freshness that she brings to screen, because she's a very unusual face and she has a very strong presence. I was happy to take a risk, and of course I did conduct an initial audition to see that she would be able to perform, because she has a very internal journey and a very very performative, very subtly performative, just without words and all that. So, and we had to put her through a small training workshop conducted by casting director Dilip Shankar. uh, so we went through all of these things and decided to go with all non-actors, but it was very challenging. If you ask me, it was one of the biggest challenges that I faced. It was easier with people whom I could communicate with, such as like Dheera, and there are a few other people you see in of her peer group. Very few, like the ex-boyfriend whose house she goes to, and the wife, and the people at the party. It was a little easier with them because it's easy to communicate with them, and I can write a scene and give it to them, and they learn it. And then of course the challenge comes as to make them act when they're not really actors, but to make them feel like, not like very stiff, and make them feel like very natural. But I did manage to pick people who were able to do that. The challenge with now the locals was of a different type, because see, my two leads, my is see, one is an old Pahadi lady, right? She's about 70, and the other is a young Pahadi boy who's about 7. Neither of them can really, I mean, the boy is still in school, so he's learning, but the old woman can't read and write. So memorizing dialogues was very, very difficult, very, very challenging for her. And yet I managed to crack a process where, she would say what I wanted her to say, but in her own words. and of course a bit of practice, a lot of retakes, and maybe going back to scenes when they weren't coming out well, and all of that. And of course a great editor whom I had, Tini Mitra, helped me to make this look very seamless in the film, but certain scenes were very, very challenging um, because of non-actors. Yeah.
So, ma'am, a film like this, Second Chance, like how difficult it is to get a producer. And right now, you will be like doing festival run, and then you will release the film. Like how difficult it is.
It's very difficult. I won't lie to you. A film like this is very difficult. I've been extremely lucky because from the beginning of the project, I've had a producer on board. His name is Sham Bora. So Sham and me are friends. We've known each other for a long time. We met on Angry Indian Goddesses, where I was writing, plus I was the first AD, and he was the line producer. So we worked together, on that project, and then we became friends. And post Angry Indian Goddesses, Sham started. He hails from the northeast of India. He's from Assam, so he went back to Assam and he started producing really beautiful Assamese films, which have traveled in really lovely festivals. And
Bhaskar Hazarika.
yes, 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 he's produced Kotha Nodi of Bhaskar and Amis, which are exceptional films. So I felt like Sham is the right producer for a film like this. And I approached him with the story even before it was a script, when it was just a bit of a story, and he really loved it. And then together we started developing it. We started sending it to various labs and workshops, and eventually mounted the. I wrote the script, we mounted the project, and we tried very hard to get funding from various sources. It was very tough. So then we went ahead and shot this on a very micro budget, which is basically just comprised of savings of me and my partner Swapnil, who's also the cinematographer and the executive producer. And then we have a few friends who joined on board at the post stage to enable a good post production. So there's Siddharth Meer of Bridge Post Work, and there's Nareen Chandravarkar of Moonweave Studios. So that's how we managed to get through our post, and basically that's how the film was made. So it's I mean it's really everybody's goodwill and savings, and a lot of hard work. And after a festival run, we are hopeful to make at least enough sales to recover what we put in, but we're being realistic about the scenario as well. It's not a very great scenario right now. It would be great if we get some kind of a small limited cinematic release, theatrical release in India. If not, then of course OTT is where everybody watches films now. So that's the way to go. To be honest, we're pretty hopeful for better sales outside India, because films like this have a market in certain parts of Europe, certain parts of cinema crazy Southeast Asian countries such as Korea and Japan, where the general audience is more open to alternative or world cinema, or indie cinema, as well as certain parts of America, I guess. So we're hoping for some sales in these parts of the world as well.
So, ma'am, are you currently doing any other projects right now?
Currently, I mean, I'm just because it's an independent film, it's one person is doing many things, so I have to do many things to keep the project afloat for the next few months, to make sure that it's traveling to the festivals that it needs to travel in the best way possible. Uh, so that is occupying quite a lot of my time, as well as I am writing. I've already started writing my second feature project. Uh, so that's an ongoing process, and there are a few other scripts that I'm writing with Pan Nalin as well. Those are long projects that have been carrying on for several years. So yes, that's what I'm doing currently.
Ma'am, will it be screening in India? Like currently, it's screening.
I will keep you posted on when it will be screening in India. We have submitted to, the major festivals, the film festivals of India are coming up October, November, December. So we have made a few submissions, and we're hoping to get some positive results. So we'll keep you posted on that. But yes, I'm really looking forward to an Indian premiere, because I think there's so many things in the story that will relate to that the Indian audience will relate to. like to watch. And I also feel like, you know, for of course, I mean, there's so many things that a Western audience gauges from a film like this, but in India particularly, I feel like Himachal Pradesh has not really been represented in cinema, and I really want people within India to see a glimpse of a very authentic local Himachal in my film. So I'm excited to have an India premiere.
As you said, ma'am, Himachal Pradesh has been looked at like beautiful landscape, and as you said, like the main motive of Black and White was to make the characters feel like characters,
Yeah,
not caricatures. So it's the best film to represent Himachal Pradesh.
thank you, thank you.
So, ma'am, any favorite films and filmmakers, like your list, like
Oh,
top 10 list and
there's
films and filmmakers?
there's so many, but like I said, going back to the beginning of our conversation, like I think the first films I saw that really opened my eyes to was, the classics. And it might sound very cliched, but everything from like Satyajit Ray to Akira Kurosawa and Tarkovsky and those greats. And then amongst the modern authors, I think the filmmakers who had quite a bit of impact in the way I think of cinema as art was Krzysztof Kieslowski and Wong Kar-wai. And in particular, with regard to how to, with regard to like neorealism, which is what I've tried to keep in the approach to the local life that we see in Second Chance, the Iranian cinemas, particularly films by Majid Majidi, because he casts complete non-actors, but I mean, and the way he tells the stories and the way they perform them, uh, it is very realistic, but it has this poetry to it which has really really inspired me, I think, in many ways. As far as my there are a lot of films with like great female leads which have been coming out of late. I'm particularly, I mean, there are many to talk about, but I'm particularly inspired by the work of Andrea Arnold, who's a British filmmaker, and her three films, The Red Road and Fish Tank and American Honey. Yeah.
And this year, another film was premiered at Cannes.
Yes, it was. It was. And of course, yet to see that. But, this approach of like a young woman's journey, coming of age, making choices, and actually figuring out who she is. Uh, I think nobody tells these stories better than her. So I've been very, very inspired by her as well. And yeah, I mean, there's so many. I mean, we can just go on and on.
Okay, okay, ma'am. So, last question is,
Acha.
if somebody, if somebody wants to ask you, like, I want to become a filmmaker,
Huh.
like, what advice would you give to them?
Oh God. What type of a filmmaker do you want to become? It would be my first.
Independent
Oh
films.
my God. God bless you. Okay, because see, it's a very, very tough journey. It's very back-breaking work. It's a very grueling journey, and there are, like I said, you have to face a lot of rejections, and you have to face um, a lot of financial problems because it's not a very lucrative profession. You should have something you can fall back upon, in some other form of income you can fall back upon, ideally. Uh, be ready to really slog it out. uh,
Yeah.
be Make sure that the stories that because you have to fight so much to just, even if it's a short film, you make sure that that story is like the best possible version of the story, and you are telling it in a very unique manner which only you can tell. That's very very important for an indie film to make its mark.
Okay.
And at the end, it's going to be a very tough journey, but it's going to be, if you manage to make it to the end, there's it's going to be extremely rewarding, and I don't think anything else can match up to it. So that's kind of like what I could. Um, I don't know if there's any advice in here, but that's my take on.
Okay.